I'm Rebeca Seitz, and this is Right to Life. I want to share some stories with you, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute, but in the interest of full disclosure, I should probably start by disclosing my own. My first baptism happened before I was even born. My mother, 7 months pregnant with me, accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior at the Baptist Temple, 30 minutes and 2 towns away from our house. Daddy, furious with a man who'd convinced his 19-year-old second wife to do such a thing, got in the car, drove to the church, and stormed his way in, demanding to speak to the preacher. Daddy ended up giving his life to Jesus that day, too. And Mama then had a believer's baptism, with me aboard. I professed my own faith at the age of 6 during prayer time in first grade at Calvary Baptist Academy. I'd already learned the alphabet by memorizing a Bible verse that began with each letter. A, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. B, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved, Acts 16:31. C, children obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right, Exodus 20:12. I promise I'm not going to do the entire alphabet, but I really did learn the entire alphabet that way. Our whole kindergarten class did. We also learned Psalm 23 and Psalm 100 that year, and then we recited it at kindergarten graduation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, that one. I faithfully read the Bible through. Though admittedly my first one was a comics version of it called the Picture Bible, but I did later graduate to the Chronological Bible, and I used KJV and NKJV for Beth Moore, Kay Arthur, Cloud and Townsend, and Kathy Tricoli Bible studies. I was carefully cultivated to joyfully accept my purpose to serve God, which would include both the communications and leadership abilities inherent to me and my identified spiritual giftings of wisdom, discernment, and prophecy. In 1992, my mother, a woman who, to hear her tell it, became pregnant on purpose at 15 years old when her daddy wouldn't let her marry her boyfriend, became interested in the fledgling pro-life movement. I was in the 8th grade. My sister was a senior at the high school where my mom worked as secretary. By that point, I'd already won Bible drill competitions, exhibiting my ability to find scripture references quickly in the Bible and quote verses or verse references on demand. Thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee, Psalm 119:11, verses like that. We had left the Baptist Temple. We were now Southern Baptist. In junior high, in between ACTEEN conferences and camp, my mother had given me James Dobson's book, Preparing for Adolescence, with the advice, everything you need to know is in here. She also got me a subscription to their relatively new tween and teen girl magazine, Brio. My 7th grade year, the magazine included a picture of me, alongside their thank you for the cookies I'd baked and mailed to their Colorado Springs offices. In 1993, my mother and the board of directors that she had assembled officially founded a crisis pregnancy center to eradicate the practice of abortion in our area of Tennessee. Now a freshman, I graduated from Bible drill to speakers drill competitions, carefully crafting speeches about the horrors of abortion, using statistics and anecdotes from the literature lying around my home. I memorized those speeches, sometimes memorizing the sign language for them as well, and then passionately delivered them before panels of judges. The awards and scholarships to Southern Baptist institutions of higher learning piled up, awaiting the day that I would graduate from high school and set off toward college to fulfill my God-ordained purpose. I rededicated my life during high school, certain that my ignorance at age 6 couldn't have allowed me to fully grasp the enormity of having my sins washed away and committing my entire life to Jesus and his way, especially now that all the political meetings, both in my home and that my parents had taken me to, had awakened my need to help take back the country for Christ. I'd met Alan Keyes, listened to Phyllis Schlafly, Newt Gingrich, Rush Limbaugh, Chuck Colson, William F. Buckley Jr., Beverly LaHaye. I read from pamphlets sent to the church by leaders of the Eagle Forum, Concerned Women for America, and other think tanks, as well as large faith-based nonprofits like Focus on the Family. I volunteered at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, marching and lending my speaking abilities to it and its abstinence program, which we delivered in area public schools. My family and I joined church friends to renovate an old house that became the CPC, painting and cleaning as best we could to create a welcoming environment for the scared girls that we envisioned coming to us for help with their unplanned pregnancies. I answered phones, typed letters, and proofread my mother's documents, and then I helped assemble them into giant binders in her new office, often to make sure that we were in compliance with the directives laid out by CareNet, the organization responsible for helping crisis pregnancy centers stay on the right side of nonprofit law while working to convince women not to get abortions. In 1996, I decided to forego the Southern Baptist offerings and attend a secular university because it was the only one whose acceptance letter came with a full academic scholarship and then some. Without that, I wouldn't have been financially able to attend college. I chose two majors, communications and political science, and I immediately got involved with the Southern Baptist Union, the student organization of Southern Baptists. My goal, my calling, was to become a senator and help enact a law that would banish abortion from this land once and for all, and then become the next Katie Couric or Ann Curry. My majors required that I complete an internship. So by sophomore year, I'd accumulated enough credits that I classified as a junior. So in spring of 1998, I moved to Washington, D.C. to serve as a Witherspoon Fellow at the Family Research Council. That's the political spinoff of Focus on the Family. One entire floor there was dedicated to combating the gay agenda. That came with capital letters. Another fellow told me that people who worked on that floor were required to rotate off after 3 to 4 months of service, lest they become infected with homophobic tendencies themselves. My communications major meant that I was assigned to the media department, where I combed newspapers 4 mornings a week for mentions of our hot-button issues, mainly abortion and the gay agenda. I'd then assemble these clips and give them to the head of the department, who would craft the FRC responses to that coverage. The goal was to keep our worldview and our organization's name in the public dialogue about these issues. On Fridays, the fellows gathered to discuss the week's reading assignments. Francis Schaeffer, Richard John Newhouse, Reinhold Niebuhr, John Witherspoon. I was impressed with how coordinated the various arms of our political machine were. I was impressed, and I was kind of proud. I mean, I hesitate to say that word because pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a mighty fall. That's in Proverbs, but I was secretly proud of us. I mean, Fox News had begun. We had a voice in the media landscape, something other than that liberal mess on NBC and ABC, CBS and CNN. I could enjoy Hannity excoriating Combs, proving over and over how our side was smarter and more aligned with truth. And yeah, that word had a capital letter too, truth. And Bill O'Reilly would remind us nightly how disgusting our president was, doing awful things in the Oval Office with an intern while protecting promiscuous women's right to kill babies as a primary form of birth control, and how we were the virtuous ones, standing in the gap, holding back the wrath of God from our land by doing his work. Onward, Christian soldiers. I believed it when my preachers told me that there was never a medical need for an abortion, that it wasn't actually health care, but primarily a way for, okay, I'm going to be crass here, but seriously, this is what we were told, that it was primarily a way for sluts to have all the sex they wanted and not have to experience the consequences of their actions. I'm sorry. I think most of my pastors and women's ministry leaders truly believed the pamphlets, mail, video, and the in-person visits from movements leaders, assuring them that God always intervened. If you're Southern Baptist, some of these ideas might sound familiar. Ideas like, if a woman's raped, she'll miscarry, so there's no need for abortion. And if she doesn't miscarry, then either she was asking to be raped, maybe her skirt was too short or her V-neck was too low or her lipstick was too red, and so this was her consequence. Or failing that, God must have some divine plan at work that humans must not interfere with. After all, didn't humans of the day see Jesus himself as an unplanned pregnancy? And what about pre-birth defects? No doctor could truly tell a woman if her in utero baby had a problem that would make life outside the womb impossible. That's what we were told. I mean, didn't we serve a God of miracles? A real mother, a real woman, would carry that pregnancy to term, trusting that God would provide a way. Because before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That's in Jeremiah. And if she couldn't afford the baby, well, then she could place it for adoption. We learned not to say give up for adoption. That sounds negative, and it might dissuade a woman from making this selfless choice for her child. No, we said place for adoption and encouraged her to be selfless, to choose life. I believe that my pastors and women's ministry leaders truly believed all of this. I believe many leaders in the pro-life movement truly believed all of this. I believe the vast majority of us are sincere people, putting our time, talent, and resources toward doing the right thing, the life-affirming thing, the thing that we believe pleases God. I know I did. With every fiber of my being, I marched on the mall proudly during the March for Life, truly believing I was helping women by doing my part to get the life-destroying act of abortion off the table as an option. And then I began to meet women like Sam.
My name is Samantha, and I live in Florida.
And in doing so, I humbly began to learn how to truly be pro-life. If you are a person who values life, who sees it as a remarkable and spectacular gift, then I think you'll want to hear these stories too. It feels important to hear these stories now because here in my state of Florida, we are voting on an amendment this November that will, if adopted by 60% of the voting public, enshrine the right to abortion in the state constitution. Please hear me when I say, I am not sharing these stories to tell you how to vote on that amendment if you're here in Florida. Your vote is your business. It is only your business. I'm sharing the stories because it's important that we have informed votes. Or as King Solomon said in my very favorite verse, which is Proverbs 4:7, chase wisdom. If it costs you everything, get understanding. See, there's a theme that you learn when you spend years studying and memorizing scripture. It's rooted in the idea of the last being first, of the meek inheriting the earth, of a virgin giving birth, or a baby in the brush leading a people out of enslavement. It's the idea that to get to the truth, we have to be willing to let our ideas be turned upside down. Just listen. Start by telling me about your husband.
My husband is a very strong man. He is the kind of man that other men want to be like, and he is also incredibly supportive of women.
And what's his background, his work background?
He's had a military background, and he's worked a lot of high threat security positions, many of them taking him away from home for long periods of time.
And did he actually go to war?
Yes, he served 2 tours in Iraq, and his job as a high threat security professional took him to the Middle East many times.
And that's all been while you guys have been together.
Yes, I met my husband when I was 19 years old, so we grew up together.
Oh, I love that.
We've gone through all of the stages together so far, and I feel like a military relationship kind of ages your relationship in dog years. It's a little different. Most of our time as a married couple was spent apart. So we had to really value and prioritize the relationship. We didn't get caught up in the things, the relationship things, the travel and the parties and all that. Those weren't things for us. All we had was each other.
Oh, I love that. All we had was each other. That's okay. We're not doing a romantic comedy. So tell me about the first time that you got pregnant. How did you find out that you were pregnant the first time?
So the first time I got pregnant, it was not planned. We were very early in our relationship, and I had missed my period, and because I was only 20, I was terrified. I had never even been to a gynecologist before. My husband was the first person I had ever been with. So, I mean, even getting just general health care in that area was not something that I'd even done before. So the first time I actually went to a gynecologist was when I was 13 weeks pregnant with my first child. And I found out I was pregnant after he was already gone. And I had to tell him that I was pregnant in a letter that I sent when he was in basic training. So
After your husband was gone. Sorry,
after
not
my
the
husband,
baby.
no, after my husband was gone. So it was a very scary yet exciting time. Abortion is obviously something that many people my age probably would have looked into. It wasn't an option for me. Not because I was religiously opposed to it, but because this is a life that I wanted. I always wanted to build a family. I probably didn't want to build a family that early, but I felt like it was meant to happen, and my husband was over the moon excited because he wanted a family too. So yes, I found out I was officially pregnant at around 13 weeks, and it was a very exciting and scary time.
Was it an easy pregnancy?
It was the most amazing pregnancy.
They trick you. The first ones trick you. Mine did too.
They do. I mean, first of all, I didn't even start showing until I was probably about 7 months pregnant. Like I
Wow.
popped at the very end, and I lost weight during my pregnancy. I mean, I was.
Oh, please. We're not friends anymore.
I know, right? I was 7 pounds lighter at the end of my pregnancy than I was when I started.
Get out. Get out.
It's the best I've ever felt in my life. I still think about that time. I worked like crazy because my husband was gone at basic training, and I was taking care of our apartment. I mean, he paid for things too, but I was fiercely independent. So I made sure that I took care of my half. So that required me to work a lot. I had taken a break from college, so I was working 2 jobs to keep everything going, and yeah, getting ready to move to Hawaii, where where he was getting stationed, and that's a lot to do when you're pregnant. I got to Hawaii in February. February 13th, I landed in Hawaii, so the day before Valentine's Day, and he had to go to the field the very next day. So I got to spend a couple of hours with him before he had to go to the field. And then our daughter was born March 10th, so I had to hurry up and find a way to secure housing for us because we weren't married when he got his orders. So I had to fight in the housing office to get us a place to stay. And I was very, very pregnant at that point. And then, navigating the health system with the military. I mean, it's wonderful that it's free, but you never see the same doctor. There's a lot of, uncertainty there. And it was my first baby, and I had no idea what questions to ask or what I was doing. So I'm very, very lucky that it was an amazing pregnancy, and the birth was flawless. It was wonderful. Other than my epidural only working on half of my body, and when I had her, I was in labor. I actually started labor and didn't realize it.
We are really not going to be friends after this.
I have kind of a high pain tolerance, but I was okay. We spent the whole day shopping, and then we went to see the movie 300. It was out, and then we went to dinner, and then we went home, and I was like, we might need to go to the hospital. So at around midnight, we went to the hospital, and I was indeed in labor, and I'd been in labor for about 11 hours. So they were very upset with me.
Oh my goodness.
And I wasn't progressing quickly enough. So they gave me Pitocin, because I was going to try and do it without any drugs. And I was like, this is easy. I've been in labor all day. This is nothing. And then they gave me the Pitocin.
Pitocin. That stuff is awful. It made me feel awful. I mean, it's useful, but man, did it make my contractions hurt.
It hit me like a brick wall. And so then I was exhausted, and She was born at 10:30 the next morning, and she was perfect and wonderful and the most beautiful little baby I'd ever seen. And they put her on my chest, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this alien. I've never even changed a diaper before. So the nurses had to show me how to change a diaper, and of course I was terrified, but
I
we did
remember
it.
when we had our first one and the time came to leave the hospital. I remember stepping outside the hospital with him. And they're just these tiny little 7-pound things. And I stepped outside the hospital and I thought, do they think I know how to do this? Like, I'm going to break this thing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just thought there should have been a license, something.
Is there a class?
Yeah, I was calling every mom friend I knew, like, I don't have a clue, so you have to come help me. I don't know what I'm doing. So then your second pregnancy was how long after that?
So about roughly 3 years after that, my son was born. That pregnancy was not as easy. I was sick. He was really, really low, so I had to wear a girdle so that I could even walk because the pain in my pelvis was a lot. And so what my husband deployed shortly after my first child was born, about 7 or 8 months after my first child was born. So I had already been through a deployment with a baby, but what happens when the soldiers are gearing up for a deployment is they have a lot of training that happens, especially where we were stationed. And so he had to leave for about a month-long period shortly before my son was born. So I was really nervous that he was going to miss the birth. And while he was gone at the field, I got really, really sick. I couldn't stop vomiting. I couldn't keep anything down. And I was by myself because I didn't have any family there.
Okay.
So it was kind of scary, who's going to watch my youngest while I'm in the hospital kind of a thing. So I went to the hospital. They were able to get me to stop vomiting, and they sent me home. And he came home from the field, and he was there in time for my son's birth. But 2 weeks after my son was born, he deployed again. And
Your other one was only 3.
so I have a 3-year-old and a 2-week-old, and nobody there I was 23, 24.
All right, Superwoman. Okay.
But it's terrifying. It was terrifying. So, anyway, yeah, I packed up the house, and my mom flew over to help me pack up the house, and we put it in storage, and I came back to this side of the world with my kids. And that was what I would do during deployments is I would spend time with my family and his family and let everyone get close to the kids. And those were really special. That was as special a time as it could be without my husband there, but it was really great. That's where I got that village, that helped me with the kids. And then, we were always excited to have him come back.
I often think about women who don't have a village to go to. I honestly don't know how. Because, part of my village came to me in the beginning because I did have difficult pregnancies, and they were emergency C-sections, so I couldn't get out of the bed initially. And I would think, what if there was no one for me to call? I just don't know how. I don't know how. I guess I will say with my second one, the nurse came to see me. The doctor had said that I could go home, and the nurse came to me that afternoon and she said, honey, just stay another day. We're all here to take care of you. We're all taking care of her. Just stay another day. Your insurance covers it. And I did. And it made all the difference in my recovery. That was my second C-section. And having that extra day of everybody waiting on me and bringing her back and forth. Having a village is amazing.
It is. And, sometimes we have to make our villages. I wasn't very good at making a village on the military base. I was surrounded by a lot of people who there was a lot of people who didn't take care of their kids on the military base. Unfortunately, with military families, you're kind of encouraged to have as many kids as you can. You get paid. You get paid more money for every kid that you have.
Wait. What?
Yeah, your paycheck goes up when you have more kids in the military. So there's a lot of people who hurry up and rush to get married because their benefits increase, and then they have kids. You can have a bigger house based on the number of kids that you have. All of that.
I had no idea. And my sister was married to the military her entire.
Well, and it kind of keeps you tied to the military, right? Because you get used to a way of living. And we didn't have to pay for housing. We didn't have to pay for electricity.
Wow.
Yeah. And we got to live in Hawaii. I mean, some people don't get to live in Hawaii, but it
Wow.
was great. But yeah, it keeps people re-enlisting. It's a definite incentive.
So then you conceived a third time.
I did. So we didn't conceive when he was still in the military. He separated from the military. He's disabled, and it's service connected. So we left the military, and that shock, that transition of leaving the military, it hits hard. And there's support out there, but when you're navigating PTSD and things like that, a lot of those guys don't want to reach out for support. So, I mean, you're told in the military, once you're a military, there's vet preference out there. You can walk right on to any police force if you want. And nobody wanted him. So I had taken a step back from school and from the workforce while he was in the military because our whole lives revolved around his work. And so I now had to step in and, I'm going back to school. I'm entering the workforce with basically a 7-year gap, and anything that I had worked before was retail, And I'm a smart person. I had a 4.2 GPA when I graduated high school. I had scholarships. I mean, but stepping back into that world after stepping away for so long, it was hard. The transition was hard. So we didn't have money for a third baby. I wanted one immediately. When I had my second, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to love another child as much as I loved my first. And
amazing how that multiplies, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, my heart just exploded when he was born. So I wasn't worried about that anymore. And I knew that I wanted another baby. So then he got his job contracting, and they pay you very well when you're a contractor.
And this was contracting over in the Middle East.
Yes.
This was security contracting.
Yes.
For those companies that we don't name out loud.
Yes.
Lest we awaken the one who cannot be named.
We're not getting black bagged.
So he goes back to the Middle East. Did you know that you had conceived again before he left that time?
We were trying. So now that he was making more money, I was able to talk him into a third one. And I
love that. I talked him into it.
And I was absolutely over the moon. I could talk to him more with this job. It was easier. It wasn't like when he was deployed in Iraq when I had to wait for him to call me. I was able to talk to him more. So I got to share that exciting news and have that announcement. I got pregnant while he was overseas. Well, I mean, I got pregnant before, and then he found out when he was overseas.
That you're like, I got pregnant before he left.
There was a lot of that in the military. But anyway, I remember, being so excited to find out and wasting so much money on pregnancy tests that I was taking too early just because I was so hoping that I would see a line. And the day came when I saw that line, and I took a million pictures of it. I mean, this is before TikTok, so I didn't have a live POV of it on TikTok, but I was so excited. And it was saying on the pregnancy test, I had one that would tell you how many weeks along you were. And it was saying that I was not as far along as I thought I would be. So I think it said I was like 2+ weeks. When I thought that I would be a little bit further along at that point. So fresh pregnant. Like they're counting times as being pregnant, like basically before we even did it.
It's like, that test is a little bit suspect.
It's a little sus. But anyway, so then this is something that I always did. I would always try to get an ultrasound right away. A lot of doctors won't give you an ultrasound right away to really confirm how far along you are and make sure that everything's okay. But I got an ultrasound as soon as I could because I was one of those that wanted to put it in the pregnancy app, and I want to know if it's a poppy seed or if it's a raspberry or if it's a pinto bean, Yep. So I want to know exactly how far along I am. And at that point, when I finally got in there, I think that they said I was 4 weeks.
Okay.
So very, very fresh. And everything seemed to be going fine. It was around Halloween that I started to feel kind of crappy. And I took my kids trick-or-treating, and my husband was gone again. So I took the kids trick or treating, and I walked a lot. So on November 1st, I started to have a lot of cramping, and I was like, maybe it's just because I walked too much yesterday. Maybe I just it's hot in Florida in Halloween. It's not like
Right.
up north. And the cramping just got worse. And then on November 2nd, which just so happens to be my mom's birthday, I was getting out of the car and I was carrying some groceries, and I felt a rush of fluid, like I peed my pants. And I've got both kids, trying to get them in the house, all these groceries, and I'm panicking because I immediately think I'm having a miscarriage. And I was really, really sad. So I took everything upstairs, and I went to the bathroom, and there was a lot of blood. So I think that I'm having a miscarriage. And I called my mom, and we talked through it, and I was just really, really sad. And as time started to pass, I started to be in severe pain. And now I hadn't had a miscarriage before. I had what I thought was maybe a miscarriage when he was in the military. But it was nothing like this. It was debilitating pain. I couldn't stand up straight. I couldn't walk. I had to crawl across the floor. And I'm fiercely independent. I'm not one, and I'm an Army wife. So I'm used to doing things on my own. I don't really call for help. But it was so bad that I couldn't walk. So I called my mom and I said, I really need someone to take me to the hospital, and I need someone to watch my kids so that I can go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and they took me in right away. At this point, I was supposed to be 8 weeks pregnant.
Are you, forgive me for asking, but are you actively bleeding, or was it just
Actively bleeding.
Okay.
I have to keep a pad on. It's actively bleeding. I had this weird pain in my shoulder. It's almost like I couldn't get a full breath. It felt like a stabbing pain. And I just felt really, really weak. And so I'm in the emergency room. They do an ultrasound. They say you're having a miscarriage. There's no baby in your uterus. And they take some blood to see what my levels are, my pregnancy hormone levels. And they took the blood when I got there. My blood pressure kept dropping, and my husband, who is overseas, is on FaceTime on my mom's phone, watching me pass in and out of consciousness, and
oh my gosh,
freaking out because they're worried that I'm dying because they can't get my blood pressure up. And they don't know why, because it's just a miscarriage. So they were able to stabilize me, and they sent me home.
Oh, wait, pause. You're having a miscarriage, go home?
Yeah. Once they got my blood pressure stabilized and I was conscious, they sent me home. And my OB had asked them to take more blood before they sent me home to test my pregnancy level, the hormone levels.
And why did they need to do that?
I know now that he wanted them to check the levels to make sure they were going down, to make sure that it was a miscarriage. And on the way home, I was driving myself home.
Of course you were. Ma'am.
On the way home, the doctor's office called me and said, you need to go back to the emergency room right now because your levels are not dropping. They are going up, which means there is still a baby somewhere in there. So I turn around, go back to the hospital, and they admit me. And this is all happening on my mom's birthday. She was so sad. So they determined that there is a baby in there somewhere. They have to go in and find where it is and remove it because the bleeding had not stopped. So they took me in, and come to find out that the bleeding was because I was bleeding internally. I had an ectopic pregnancy in my fallopian tube that had ruptured. And had they sent me home and maybe I just not answered that doctor's call, I could I could have bled to death and just died.
Mm.
That would have been nice, for my husband to be overseas and my kids to
And for
find
your
me.
children to see that.
Yeah.
And oh,
So they had to go in, and he asked my OB asked me, "Do you want me to try to save your fallopian tube, or do you just want me to tie your tubes?" Because obviously it's pretty traumatic. And I said, "No, I want to try again." And that was when I had when they thought that I was having a miscarriage, and my husband was on the phone with me. He kept saying, "Don't worry, babe, we'll try again. Just don't worry," because he knows that it's obviously upsetting, and I am the kind of person that feels guilty and feels responsible. And he's like, "Just don't worry about it. We will try again." So with that support, I told him, do everything you can to try to save it. I want to try again. And he was actually able to save my fallopian tube. So when I was recovering from the surgery, he came in to speak with me afterwards. And I remember him saying, the baby was thriving. And that sentence, "the baby was thriving," will haunt me forever, because the thought of removing that life, my own child, it's haunting. So
would it have ever survived? Would it have ever gone to term?
that wasn't even offered to me. I don't even know if that's scientifically possible.
I want to pause the interview for just a moment to clarify. According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, quote, "A tubal ectopic pregnancy will never be viable. It cannot move or be moved to a place in the uterus where it can safely grow to delivery."
And I mean, the way that I think about it is, if a womb is like a garden bed, my baby was growing on the sidewalk next to it. Like, it just it wasn't going to happen. And I actually found out after the surgery that the reason that I had that ectopic pregnancy was because of my PCOS, and I had a softball sized cyst that was pulling my ovary down, which caused a kink in the fallopian tube. So the baby could not travel to the uterus to implant.
And did they remove that
Yes.
at the same surgery or later?
It was the same surgery.
So the surgery that we're talking about, we're using the word surgery, was an abortion.
It was.
It was a D&C specifically, right?
I believe so, yes.
I want to clarify here as well. D&C stands for dilation and curettage, or curettage, depending on how you pronounce that word. According to the Mayo Clinic, quote, "In a dilation and curettage, small instruments or a medication is used to open," they use the word dilate, "the lower narrow part of your uterus, your cervix. Next, a surgical instrument called a curette, which can be a sharp instrument or a suction device, is used to remove uterine tissue." That's what a D&C is. And so without that D&C, do you think you would have lived?
No. I would have bled to death. It would have gotten worse. They wouldn't have been able to stop the bleeding.
And how far along were you when this happened?
8 weeks.
So this is not a political show. It's not that, but we do live in Florida. And as of May 1st of 2024 of this year, we don't have access to abortions after 6 weeks, unless we can find a couple of doctors to write letters and say we're going to die. And I mean, this doctor, they sent you home. So I've spoken with the attorney of one of our very large hospital providers, and they've said we will in no way be allowing our doctors to write those letters, because if somebody disagrees with them later, they can lose their license. There are all kinds of things that can happen. To clarify, the law states that, quote, "Any person who willfully performs or actively participates in a termination of pregnancy in violation of the requirements of this section commits a felony of the third degree, punishable as provided in sections 775.082 and some others." So I looked those sections up. If you look them up, you learn that the penalty for a third-degree felony in the state of Florida is up to $5,000 in fines and 5 years in prison.
And I don't know if this is okay for me to say, but that's the hospital I was at.
I see. I see. So you wouldn't have gotten two letters anyway. In 2024, you're not going to be getting those letters, according to one of the attorneys for that hospital. So to me, when I heard about your story, which I didn't, I'm full disclosure, I'm working on a show with Sam's husband that goes live later. It's later in the year, and she happened to come to a development meeting with him because I really wanted to meet his cool wife that he was always talking about. And I walked into the development meeting. I said, "Oh, Sam's here. I finally get to meet Sam." And then he began speaking with someone else in the meeting, and Sam and I started getting to know each other. And somehow this came up. I don't even remember how it came up. But I said, "I've been thinking about doing this podcast, and these are the kinds of stories that when I was in the pro life world, I was told these kinds of stories don't exist, that abortion is for promiscuous women who don't want to deal with the consequences of their actions, and that it's never necessary health care. It's not health care." That's what I was taught. And I do believe that the people who taught me that also believe that. And so we feel like we're doing the right thing and the good thing to not make it accessible. But then when I hear stories like yours, I think, okay, well, if you didn't have access to that, your two children wouldn't have their mother, and your husband wouldn't have his wife, and then you conceived again,
Yeah.
right?
So to grow on that. So I mean, if this had this legislation passed at that time in my life, my story would have ended there on November 2nd.
Mm.
But he was able to save my fallopian tube, and my husband came back and we tried again, and I got pregnant again, and it was an amazing pregnancy. And on November 2nd of the following year,
Really? Oh, I love that.
my daughter was born, and back in that very same hospital,
Wow.
having my baby. And so, I mean, it's important to have these conversations because it's so easy to try to make things black and white, and things aren't black and white. And I live in a place where I'm surrounded by people who would think that I was a murderer, but sometimes you have to make decisions so that there can be life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it is healthcare. I could have more kids if I wanted to, which I would love to.
How's your husband feel about that?
I got to talk him into more. But I mean, even after all of that happened, my husband decided to run for office, for political office. And part of that is going out and getting signatures to get your name on the ballot. So trying to be the supportive wife, I popped all the kids into a stroller and had some kids walking with me, and we walked our neighbors that we see every day. And I went from door to door asking for signatures, not for you to vote for him, but to get his name on the ballot, because that's democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every single one of my neighbors, when I ask the question, the first thing out of their mouth is, "What does he think of abortion?" And
Really?
yes, to try to skirt around that difficult question, because my husband fully understands about healthcare and that I wouldn't be standing there without it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, look at these kids. What do you think?" What do you think he thinks? And then their demeanor would change. But so much of me wanted to tell each one of them that story, because these are not horrible people. A lot of them are your neighbors, and they believe something that based on faith a lot of times. And it means so much to them, but they don't dig deeper than that first level of the story.
Yeah. When it comes to this show, I said at the top that, I'm not here to tell anybody how to vote or, talk to anybody about you need to change your politics or affirm your politics. That's your choice. That's between you and your God if you have one. But when we go in to vote, the beautiful thing in this country still is that when we go in to vote, it's just us. Nobody else knows. They don't know what you're doing. You're accountable to yourself for what you're about to do. And so it's really important that you think about what you're about to do and the ramifications not just on yourself, but on your neighbor. And it's, to me, coming from the community that I came from, I think I'm so grateful that I can do what I think is right and nobody's in there with me. Anything else you want to tell everybody?
No, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know it's, when I asked you to do this, I thought, did you really just ask that woman to come on and tell everybody? Like, you are so rude, Rebecca.
No.
But I was like, we have to, right? Like, our stories are powerful.
And I don't have shame around my story. So many times abortion is associated with shame, but I have my beautiful rainbow baby because of that. So there's no shame here.
Your November 2nd baby.
My baby.
That's so awesome. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
No problem.
As a lifelong pro-lifer, I have to contend with stories like Sam's. The 6-week abortion ban in place in Florida as of May 1st, 2024, will result in the deaths of women exactly like her. I was taught to, and I did, value life that grows in the womb. But in doing so, I lost sight of the person, the woman. I lost sight of a serious truth.
My name is Samantha, and I have a right to life.
You've been listening to Right to Life on the 1C Story Network. If you have a story to share or would like to learn more, please visit righttolifestories.com. This show is brought to you by the generous support of people who value life. To contribute, visit righttolifestories.com and click on the GoFundMe icon or get in touch.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.